Hello, everyone. Welcome. This recording is going to go up on YouTube, so I want to also address those who might be listening to this afterwards, which might be a fair chunk of people. So for those listening to the recording, watching the recording, thank you for coming out and being here. It's most likely you will just see me, not the sea of people that are here, but we'll see how the recording goes. Obviously, I'm Irene, and I created a course called Smart Body, Smart Mind 10 years ago. And we're at that next level where I feel ready to start working with others so that they can also do this work. So that's kind of like the basic intro. I have a ton of questions that were submitted, and I hope to get, um, if there's questions on the fly in the chat, I'll do my best to answer them. What I've started to see is the questions are all very similar, and that's normal, right? Because you're probably wondering the same things. And as I say that, I'm feeling a very -1 draft coming through my window. So I'm going to close it, or else I'm going to keep orienting to this freezing cold Arctic air. So just a moment, I'm going to stand up and I'll be back. All right. Sometimes the circadian stuff just doesn't work when you want some light in the room, but we got to close the windows. So first of all, thank you everyone for being here. Right now we've got about 80-ish people online live. There's a website. So I hope everybody found the website. Depending on your screen situation, you may or may not be able to follow along on that website. I'm not going to go through it step by step because that's not good use of my time. I want anyone who's interested in this new idea, this scientific practitioner track, to really move through that site slowly, carefully. We haven't made it easy to read to be on purpose. Like there's a lot of text there because this is like, important stuff. And I want to make sure you get all the fine print, all the details. If you can't find it, it's on the chat high above. But if you just go to my site under live events, you'll find it should be there. If it's not, apologies, but it's definitely up on the chat. Now, I'm going to start off by, first of all, thanking all of you. I think most people here are SBSMers, some might not be. And I took a risk 10 years ago when I brought this stuff online. And I was the first person to bring this trauma work, this nervous system work in a format that would teach people how to work with themselves. I was one of the first people, if not the first person to do that. So I own that. And it worked. Now it's not going to work for everyone. Everyone's different, but we have, I believe, quite a few people, thousands, who have experienced that this can work. So thank you for trusting me, for those that took the plunge even like 8 years ago when this was fairly new. I also want to thank my teachers because it is them who have paved this way and more know about this work. So I'm going to just name some of them, obviously, all my university professors. There's too many to name. Jeff Haller, who is my Feldenkrais trainer. Obviously, Peter Levine, who founded Somatic Experiencing, and his sort of protege at the time, Steve Hoskinson. I trained with Steve. Twig, some of my great assistants that I learned from. Kathy Kane, who also trained with Peter and then branched off and did her own thing. Stephen Terrell, who also trained with Peter. There's a trend here. And, did his own thing. And then they combined. And then all of my colleagues that I learned from, that I consult with. My husband, Seth, has been a great help. And then all of you and all of the people in my private practice. So for those that don't know, I was in private practice for a very long time. And that formed what I now have created based on working with people. So this call is going to be a little, I don't want to say all over the place because there's no framework for this new venture, but I'm going to do my best to stay in alignment of order here. But what I want to just say before I get into details is, because one of the questions that has been asked a lot is, will I get certified? Will I get a certificate? Will this be recognized by medical continuing education? Will I find work? Et cetera, et cetera. Now, these are all valid questions. I can tell you right now, when I went into my Feldenkrais training, when I went to my SC training, when I went into my trainings with Kathy and Steve, I'd never had those questions in my mind because it wasn't about the certificate. So this journey is not about a certificate. I would like that to occur eventually, okay? But I did not get a Feldenkrais certificate in 1 year. I did not get an SE certificate in 1 year. I certainly did not have the ability to work with people perfected, and not that it's by any means perfect, but I do feel like I'm a master at the work now. But the first beginnings of this work is less about that piece of paper and more about your interest and your absolute crazy passion to study this stuff. That's number one. I want to create a certificate. I do. I want to put you guys through really smart testing and practicums. And we did a little bit of that in the beta. I need some water. But this first level, so I'm going to speak to this level 1 of SPT, that's Psi Intuitive Practitioner Track, is about learning, it's about practice, it's about collaboration, it's about working with your peers, it's about taking critical feedback when it might be due, and also reinforcing things that go well. It's not just for, oh, just a second, I'm going to clear my throat. It's so dry here with the snow, just a second. All right. Oh, I promise I'm not in a sympathetic activation. It's just very dry. So, we will get to that, but this first level is about experience and it's about practice and it's about reinforcing what you already learned in SBSM. So I just want to start with that. The next piece is the career that you might get after this is for you to figure out. In other words, a lot of people are asking, will this be accepted by so-and-so place or that place? Here's the reality. If I took my CV, if I made a CV with all of my credentials and what I've created and all of your testimony of how this has helped you heal your trauma, and if I were to see that maybe I needed a job, and I saw that they were looking for a trauma therapist at the local school or hospital, they would not hire me because I am not accredited through a British Columbia, right? A psychology association or social workers association. I do have degrees for fitness. So if I wanted to go and become a personal trainer again, I have that. But right now, at least right now, and I'm sure there's some exceptions in very holistic, alternative, fringe-like wellness centers that are looking for SEPs and Feldenkrais practitioners. But I can guarantee you, and this is like not selling this very well, but I want to be really honest. No one is going to be looking for a Psi Intuitive practitioner. But that's okay, because nobody was looking for me when I started my work 15 years ago, right? I walked through the town I lived in and I put up posters on every single coffee shop window, every single physio, chiro, massage, pool, rec center, anywhere there was a bulletin board, I put up my little poster saying Feldenkrais classes with Irene, and nobody knew what those were, right? But over time, just like anyone building a practice, word gets out. Make sense? So that's where I say you have to be really dedicated, because no one's going to come knocking on your door. Now, there might be exceptions. There might be exceptions because we are a little further ahead. I was listening or watching a Bob Dylan documentary last night, as you do. And one of the first things he said in the first 30 minutes, it's a great documentary, by the way, time and progress. Because if you know his story, people didn't like it when he started to change. They wanted him to go back to what he used to do, and time and progress. So there's been a huge amount of progress since I started my Feldenkrais learning in 2004. And there's been a lot of progress since 2008 when I started my SE training. There are people who now know what trauma is. It's not a scary word. The nervous system isn't a scary word. My first business coach told me, don't put nervous system on your site. No one knows what that means. That wasn't very long ago. So, if I think of what has happened with Smart Body, Smart Mind, it's very possible that in 10 years, heck, I'm looking for a scientuitive practitioner. I'm looking for a scientuitive educator. I'm looking for a scientuitive group teacher. It's very possible that that will occur, but I don't have a crystal ball. I have you who have gone through SBSM and know that there's something good here. So one other thing I want to mention is, and this says this on the site, my intent is to not produce SE practitioners because I can't legally, right? It's not what I'm interested in. My intent is not to produce Feldenkrais practitioners. That's a whole other art form, and it's a 4-year training, and it's intense. My goal is to create scientuitive practitioners, and the curriculum is based from the Smart Body, Smart Mind curriculum, the lessons, the learnings, the way in which I blend Feldenkraisian principles into the SE principles, the way that we work with gentle movements of the body, the potent posture, the kidneys, the adrenals, the diaphragms. These are not organs that are trademarked by SE or Feldenkrais. They're just part of our body, and you have learned how to work with them in a very specific way through my voice for yourself. You've seen the benefits. So a scientuitive practitioner, I'm just riffing here, might work with someone to teach them about their physiology. And my beta students, we did 2 cohorts the last 2 years. Some of them are here. They saw, what we played with. We played with teaching basic neurosensory exercises to their peers, teaching basic biology of stress theory to their peers, right? In a very contained, safe space, because it was just about, for some, it was a 10-week process. For some, it was 12 weeks. And it was minimal. It was 2 hours a week and a little bit of homework, right? So, but I watched what happened with them immersing kind of ad nauseum into these basics over and over and over again. And it created it such that many of them, it became natural when they would teach, when they would instruct. So imagine that expanded into a year, and also with a bit more direction, because I'm a bit clearer on what needs to be done. And obviously we'll have 2 in-person live workshops, because I was reminded after teaching recently, in-person is so important. And I know I'm seeing the fallout of a lot of these trainings only being online the last 4 years. It's not good. A lot can be done online, and we're going to do a lot online because we can, but we need to be in person, working with each other in the field, all that stuff. And it's fun. It's fun when we're together, right? Okay, I'm going to look at my notes. Look at my notes. So in many ways, what this isn't, it's not a replacement for other things. it's really about, and I wrote these 3 words down, elevating, expanding, and evolving the next chapter of this work. Um, because the model that many have been taught, and I'm going to get into the questions really soon here, has been very specific. A trauma session where you work with someone for an hour and there's no creativity around that. And I know from talking to students, they're being so creative in how they bring this work into their existing work or into how they work with their kids or their employees. So this is very different than teaching you to be clinical. It's about teaching you to have an apprenticeship of working with the nervous system and all these somatic systems in relationship to you and the person or the group that you're working with. Or the educational material. Maybe you have a knack for art and you want to make cards that are pretty for kids. I don't know, just that just came out of my head, right? There's so many creative ways that we can take this work into other elements. And my sense is we don't want it to just be in the clinical space, because if it's in the clinical space, then it's just seen as something you do when you're sick, right? And how many times have people said to me, "Oh, Irene, I wish this was in the school system. I wish this was in this system, the university system, all the systems." And I don't think we're going to get into the systems. I think we're going to create a new system in how we work with people. So this is why I also say you have to have a creative spark in you. This is not signing up to have a 9 to 5 job where someone hires you, they pay you a paycheck every 2 weeks, and you don't think about it when you go back home. Right? So I'm going to go to this chat here. Okay. I'm going to get in some questions. First logistic is we're going to open up registration, or not registration, it's not really registration, applications. We're opening up applications for those who fit the criteria. The criteria is you've moved through SBSM. And when I say move through, I don't just mean you've done it and gone through the motions. You have really embodied it. You're feeling it. You've seen the changes. You've seen the shifts in your own regulation. Doesn't mean you have to be perfect, but you have had experiences that have shown you, wow, this is what happens when I work with this work. Because that forms the glue for you to work with others. So all the labs, all the lessons, even the ones that you don't like, all the training calls, and up to date, because I added a training call maybe a year and a half ago. So if you are here and you haven't revisited SBSM materials in a few years, you're going to want to move through the materials again. I might even suggest to those who we bring in that the homework between like April and September is to go through at least certain things again. The Q&As. Now, a lot of times people don't think I need to go to Q&A because I don't have a question. Those are still so rich in learning and theory. So those are important to review. I'm not going to make it such that you have to go through all the other extra resources, but the more you can immerse within all of the curriculum, even Elia's lessons, movement, getting into a different kind of groove, super important. So we're going to open up applications on the 6th, which is Wednesday, and then they close on the 21st. But don't wait until the 20th, because you need to have a actual curriculum vitae, a resume, which shows, your education, what you're currently doing, all the things that you normally would have in a resume. Look it up online if you haven't made one in a while. We will have you do a written statement through a survey form with all the other information we're going to ask, like your time zone, when you did SBSM, et cetera, et cetera. And then a video. And there'll be some very specific questions that you have to answer in video format. And then those who are shortlisted will have myself, me, and you will have a Zoom call to just chat and just, see if this is really for you. One thing that's important to realize, and there were some people in the beta, and I'm glad that these people found this out, is they found out that when they started to get into beta and do the learning, they realized, I don't want to do this anymore for a profession. That's okay, right? And the reason I say that is sometimes when we are healed and have massive changes from a methodology, we instantly want to become the person that helps other people get that. And that's not everyone's path. And that's okay, right? There are other things that we can do in this world to be of service to others while we are in regulation, right? So being in this work requires a gusto. It requires being good with horrific shit and hearing swear words and not freaking out because your clients or your group will do that stuff. It requires having an edge, being able to think quickly on your feet, being able to make something from scratch. I often use cooking as an example. You do not have to know how to cook from scratch to do this, but that's the kind of ways that you have to be on your feet when you're doing this work. When you're working with someone, you can't refer to your notes. Just a sec, let me find the next thing to do, right? You can't. Because I watched some people teach Feldenkrais that way back in my day, and it was not a good sign of a confident, competent practitioner that they had to keep referring to their notes. So it's something that you need to really realize. Like I feel I got a knack for this. I'm already naturally teaching people about this. I'm already naturally doing this work with friends and kids and my kids without telling them I'm doing it. Hope that makes sense. Like there's a way in which we naturally integrate this without even realizing it. Um, so I just wanted to make that clear. Um, Everything is mandatory. So in other words, there was someone that had asked, it's possible during 1 week, I've got to be somewhere here for a family thing. You gotta schedule the time. Now, if someone has a massive emergency, of course, and you can't make the live call, we have our calls, our training calls will be on Mondays. Pacific time, the morning Pacific time. If there's obviously an emergency and you just can't make it or you're sick with a fever, then of course. But, if you're, if there's a 50th birthday party, in Vegas and it falls on that week, it's like then go into your hotel room at that time and hang out with us for 2 hours. Right. So the reason I say that is there is a serious commitment to this. It's not honor system. So I want to make sure people show up live as much as possible, if not always. And same goes with the live in-person retreats. The first one will definitely be 5 days. The second one, maybe 5 to 6 days. We already have our venues locked in for Vancouver and Europe. And it's not, you can't show up a day late and you can't leave 2 hours early to catch your flight. No, not. Okay, so I want to be very clear because I saw that occur in a lot of my trainings where people wanted to catch the flight early to get home the next day so that they go to work. That will not fly. So again, unless there's like an emergency and you have to leave, we'll take those exceptions, but you got to plan to be there and stay fully through all of the in-person retreats and online time. Someone asked about integration days after the in-person retreats. That's up to you. So basically it's such that, we end on say a Friday and I want people to stay at the venue and we've accommodated it. So the accommodation is there, say that Friday night, and then we have breakfast on Saturday and then we leave. So that will be the integration time. If you feel that you need an extra day before traveling, then you plan that in. that's for you to plan and for you to figure out. But we don't want anybody, leaving that night or showing up that morning, arriving into Vancouver at 5 a.m. on a flight, and then you're exhausted. That's the key, is we don't want you being exhausted when you show up. So I'm just going to run through these that were submitted. Is this program accredited? And if so, by whom? No, it is not accredited. So I've already covered that. Maybe one day, but right now, systems that accredit need to see evidence-based research and we have some of it, but not enough, right? Not enough yet. Do you know any doctors who have done this course and are interested and are practicing it? If so, what is their setup? So I know that there are physicians and surgeons who have gone through SBSM. As far as I know, no one is leaving their medical profession to be a practitioner of this work. I know some people have, but I don't know anyone who's gone through SBSM and who's just doing this work. So I do know the doctors who have done SBSM use those principles and practices for themselves when they are working, when they are in surgery, when they confront trauma, that kind of thing. But they're integrating it into how they might work with their patients. Is level 1 adequate to be able to promote oneself and work as a science intuitive practitioner? So technically, no, but it depends what you're already doing. So I prefer, and we're not going to try to police you, so this is where you have to have your own ethics. Please, have your own ethics. No, there won't be full science intuitive practitionership after 1 year. I didn't get that. I don't think anyone should be able to get fully trained at this level in 1 year. And if they are, then I'd like to see how they did it. And I've seen people in my SE trainings try to rush through and get their training done in 1 year by like flying to different countries. And you could do that, but you need to integrate this stuff. So no, that will not be there. One could say that they are heavily influenced and have done the SBSM curriculum, and they are currently in a mentorship program with Irene Lyon, and here's her stuff, and right. So if you're already working in an in-person situation, if you don't, here, I'll say this in a different way. For all of you who are working now with people, and it doesn't have to be in health. It could be you're a business owner, right? And you manage people. If you are not yet integrating the work you've learned for yourself in your daily life and in your work, then this might not be for you. I'm being really honest. Because I saw people when I was assisting in trainings who couldn't figure out how to integrate what they were learning into their psychology practice, into their massage practice. And that was always a red flag because it showed that they didn't have it inside of them. Hope that makes sense. Okay. How does one sense that they're ready to do this? I can't answer that. You have to answer that. I kind of just answered it by saying, if you're not integrating this already naturally, then it might not be the right time, right? Now, one doesn't, again, have to be in perfect regulation, but they have to know that that will be a big process as they move through this. The other thing I'll say, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, I have experienced in my career that those who stay in relationships that are toxic and who don't, if you have a significant other, and by significant other, I mean you're in a marriage or something like that, right? Husband, wife, committed relationship, whatever you want to call it. If that person that you are with 24/7 mocks, can't let you feel that you can't express yourself around them, if you feel embarrassed to get down on the floor and roll around like a baby, if you can't set a boundary without feeling afraid, that will hinder your ability to do this work. And that's truth. I know many colleagues who have stayed single, not that I'm saying you should, because they just can't find that connection with a partner. Now, this doesn't mean, of course, that it can't happen. Of course, it can happen. I've experienced that myself, but you will diminish your ability to really live this work if you are with someone who doesn't support. And by support, it doesn't mean that they're paying the bills. Because I've also worked with colleagues who say, oh yeah, my husband supports me. He pays for everything. It's like, that's great, but you can tell that there's like a level that's not there. They don't have to be a practitioner, but there has to be that ability to like, oh, okay, so and so is doing her thing. Okay, cool, you go, or what do you need? Right? There needs to be that support. Someone asks, I work in a large corporation with decent amounts of responsibility in coaching people and mentoring. Would that make me a suitable candidate, even though I'm not a functional movement practitioner? Yes. So this Scientuitive practitioner track is not about teaching you guys and gals how to fix body problems functionally with movement. It's not a Feldenkrais training, right? If you know that you really want that level of detail and you want to work with stroke and, severe pain of the body and reteaching, then, maybe consider the Feldenkrais training. And I also know that I want to get to a level, and this probably will be in level 2, 3, 4, right? Because again, you can't do everything in 1 year, where we are teaching students how to teach their students or their one-on-one people how to roll, how to get up properly, how to crawl, how to get back into these developmental movement patterns. The Feldenkrais practitioner training is extensive. There's stuff in that training that I will never touch, not because it wasn't good, but because most people just don't need that level of detail. But rolling, coming to sit, coming to stand, learning how to stand properly, how to crouch, all the up and down material that Elia and I teach, that's fair game. There's no reason that after a few years, a Scientuitive practitioner could not teach those movements and those lessons because it's in us, right? It's developmentally what we're built to do. So in my sense, we don't need to have 4 years of Feldenkrais to do that. What type of work does this prepare me for, both one-on-one and group? My intent is yes, both. I'll actually get to this, and there's another question coming up that covers this a bit more. Time zones. So yes, someone picked up on this. So our Aussies here, and I know there's some Aussies and Kiwis maybe, and people in a very different time zone. Priority is going to be for Pacific time teaching in the morning. So we'll probably have the live online training be somewhere between 9 a.m. Pacific and noon, 12 p.m. Pacific. We did 10 to 12 when we did the beta cohorts, and that worked well for North America and Europe. It was a little late for the Euros, so we might start a little earlier. But depending on where you are on that big hunk of Australian land, it just might not work. And I really want to avoid people having to get up at 2 a.m. to train or staying up late. It just, your brain needs to be rested and not in the middle of the night. If we have enough Aussies to create a cohort that would be at say 3 p.m. Pacific, which is I think a more decent morning hour for that time zone, I might consider it, but we need to have enough people. And we need to have enough people because you guys have to have your peers to connect with and work with. So if there's just one Aussie, it won't work because you need to have connection with someone else in your country and in your time zone. So we'll see. So someone asked, how long will it be? So yeah, in my hope, this is not something that's just one level. We have multiple levels. And as we get to like level 2 and 3, deeper work at the trauma level will work. But in level 1, we will not be getting into working with surgical trauma, for example, fluid trauma, for example. Things like shock trauma and early developmental trauma, while they're not easy, they come a little more naturally when we're doing developmental patterns, when we're doing movement, when we're guiding people through the basics. But here's what I have found. When you have solid regulation on board and you understand that these things exist, and you understand how to hold sympathetic activation, like roller coaster ride sympathetic activation with yourself, or you know that, oh, we're slipping into dorsal freeze right now. I better do some extra grounding and some extra orienting so I don't fall asleep while my, student here is lulling me into freeze, because that happens, right? These are the things that you naturally pick up on when you start doing this work. So it isn't like we're not going to touch the trauma in the first year. Of course we will. Of course we will. But we're not going to sit down in the way we might in some other trainings and say, okay, now we're going to work with horror, or now we're going to work with anger, or now we're going to work with orienting, right? This is again back to Bob Dylan, time and progress. I've seen that working just in those contexts, it's a little too much in a vacuum. Doesn't mean we wouldn't talk about it in discussion, right? So discussions are also very important. Q&A, very important. Consultation, very important, because that's when you actually learn the finesse of how things might be different in different scenarios. Okay. The other thing that's important to understand is that, when that question, how long will this be? Even if you go and study medicine, a good medical doctor doesn't say, I'm done my degree at 4 years, right? They keep learning, they keep going to conferences, they specialize. And it's no different here. And what I saw a lot of is people would finish, say, their basic SE training. Again, nothing against the SE training, there's merit to it, but there was nothing that really encouraged the continuation with the master classes. And the master class level, in my opinion, is where the real juice came in. And that's what you get as SPSMers when you learn healthy aggression, toxic shame. None of that is in the basic SE training, right? And that's okay. It just isn't. That was all learned after the SE training. Okay, already answered that. All the pricing is on the page. Okay, so it's priced for a year-long training. There's also a monthly plan. If you need a longer plan, we're going to figure out how that can work. If you look at that cost, it is inclusive of your food and accommodation at the retreat centers. So that is being subsidized by me. So that is in there already. You just have to get there. Now, I'll speak freely about this. This training is not entrepreneurial. This is an important thing. The reason why that's important is I do not want to get as many as I can to make money. I have an employer. I get paid. I'm good, right? So what often occurs, and sometimes we don't realize this, but a lot of the trauma trainings are entrepreneurial. Of course, they want to help people, but it's how many can we get? That's fine. That's a model that some people choose to work with. But if you think about college, university, well, yes, those places make money. They also don't make a lot of money, right? They're covering admin costs, expenses, the janitor, of course they pay their teachers, the teaching assistants, but the model is based on covering costs and ensuring we can keep the electricity on in a school, right? So we're trying to find a way to make it accessible, such that it isn't, $30,000 for a year. because obviously that's not the way it is. Can we pay in Canada and Canadian if we live in Canada at this point? No, because we're working across two different currencies, euros, Canadian, and US. I know we're in Canada, but a lot of our expenses are US. So we've just figured out the base cost in US dollars that works across all currencies. Will this program be offered again next year as well? I do not know. So it says that on the FAQ. I don't know, right? There's only one me at this point, and I only have a few assistants, and we will need to see what occurs, right? So this is very different than another organization that might have multiple trainers. So no, at this point, I'm not sure. I hope so, but I don't know. Payment plan. So for those that do the payment plan, the first payment goes in March, and then it's every month after that. So you will prepay before we start in September. We will have contact with you before September for sure. As I said, there'll probably be some homework that you have to do to just get refreshed. And we definitely will meet before we meet in person as a big cohort. Again, there'll be two cohorts, my hope, a Euro cohort and a North American cohort. Currently, the venue in Europe is in Austria. I have deep ties with Austria, so I have more support on ground there. And we found, I just got shivers thinking about it, this beautiful place east of Innsbruck that is super clean, no chemicals, tons of light. It's in nature, it's still residential, but it's, you know, it's in trees. And so Innsbruck is a pretty, it's a good town because it's tourist town. Tons of people speak English. There's an airport. We looked, the flights are easy from the London to Innsbruck. So that's where that one's going to be. The site is on the website to that. It's called Seminar Hof. And then the other venue in Vancouver is outside of Vancouver up towards my old town of Whistler, where I used to live. So it is also in the mountains, and it is also at a retreat center that is beautiful. And they've just kept it going really well since I lived there. I taught there a long time ago. All venues, just to give you an idea, are you know, the food we are making omnivore. So there'll be a bit for everyone. There'll be vegetables, grains, meat, fish, poultry, dairy. I'm trying to do organic as much as possible because that's important to me. So these are things we are thinking about. How many people? We're hoping to have a minimum of 12 in each cohort, but I'm willing to take 16 because I know that there is attrition. You know, life happens. I know that. And so just like any other training, often, you know, life happens and they have to stop, you know, so that's the hope. This is a longer question, but it's a good question. So I'm gonna read it in full and answer as I go through this. So this person writes, every single training I've done, and this person has done a lot, SE, integral, somatic psychology, organic intelligence, focusing, and polyvagal work. Every training assumes somatic work is done in a therapy type of framework. By that, I mean one-on-one, in person or on a video call session that lasts about 50 minutes, delivered around once a week for a number of consecutive weeks. They only train you to deliver this kind of session, and there's nothing beyond that one skill, but there's so much more to succeeding in this field. Yes, correct. Will this training address working in alternate formats, ranging from groups and workshops in person and online? So yes. So my hope, because now we have this online space, and the beta folk got a little bit of this in beta. They might remember, you know, we did some online stuff. We did online stuff that wasn't about trying to get a somatic release. It was just being with the person, witnessing, sensing. For those that were in Broughton when I was teaching, last November, there was a fun time where I got the students to teach their peers in group, and that was super fun. And it just showed how much powerful stuff happens when you throw folks in right away to just teach group. So yes, there will be ways in which we guide you to practice with group, but also one-on-one. And in short formats, this idea of working 50 minutes to 1 hour. I mean, who here knows that they had to maybe stop some of the lessons at the first 10 minutes, right? When you were doing SBSM, for example, right? Well, why wouldn't you transfer that to working with people? So this is where, again, it makes it a bit trickier because the model has been based on you bill out for your hour and you get this many clients a week so you can make your rent, right? Or your bills. And so this is where this becomes different and creative in that you have to find a way to, in some ways, still work with the person, but not always with them in person, online, or, you've got to get creative. And so there's a bit more to this question. And then they say, maybe one way to sum this up, all the training I've ever done is just addressing somatic release and integration, full stop. So if we come back to the ethos of SBSM, is the focus somatic release? No. The focus is building up that swimming pool, right? So the beach balls can move a bit and then the releases might come out. This is the same. So this is the other thing is there's this feeling sometimes, oh, I'm going to be a scientific practitioner or I'm going to be a somatic trauma therapist. I'm going to help people get rid of their traumas. The moment we go in with that mentality, we've already kind of lost because the person on the other end, and these are the things that we'll talk about, will sniff out that you're trying to get them to do something. And when there's early trauma on board, the brakes just go on. It's like, I'm not doing that for you. I'm thinking of something that came in the other day on Instagram where someone was saying, I don't understand. I've been working with a somatic therapist. She didn't say where they were trained. And they keep telling me to slow down. And I understand the importance of slowing down, but I really just wanted to get my body moving a bit more. So why am I hiring this somatic therapist who's supposed to help me heal? And my impulse is to go fast. And then they're telling me to go against my impulse and I'm super confused, right? And so that's like a long kind of vignette to say, it's not about the release. It's not about being in the body. There's a funny one, right? Because I caught some of our beta folk kind of getting like, oh, I got to get the person into their body, into their body. No, you don't. It's not about that. It's about getting the person into more capacity so they naturally can come into their body and into the environment. And that's where I think there's been a little bit of a loss in translation is these somatic methodologies. Yes, it's about the body, but it's about how can we create the conditions so that this happens. It's very chaos systems theory, right? How do we create the conditions so the right thing starts to unfold? And then you, as the scientific practitioner or scientific mentor in your training, are guiding, but you're also guiding through your own personal intuition. So the other part to this question, the other trainings I've done do not teach you how to help someone with lifestyle support, habit change. I know these elements are in SBSM, but how will you train practitioners to deliver this information? Are they going to be using your online materials with your clients? Will they be encouraged to create their own or something else? So this is a great question. So part of what we did in beta testing with our 2 cohorts, and this will continue through all of level 1, is you will be responsible for improving yourself, your self-care. This is more than just nervous system work and more than just, say, meditation, exercise, food, circadian health, relationships, all the things that go into that first stage of neuroplastic healing, right? Now, that does not create you do not become a health coach or a nutrition coach or an exercise trainer because you've done that yourself. So this is where you got to be ethical, right? But if you see that someone could really use some help learning how to properly exercise, you find referrals, right? This is where you have to grow your database of colleagues who are also trauma informed. And it's very possible that within our cohort, there will be people who are specialized in nutrition, in homeopathy, in exercise, in circadian biology, in detoxing, and all the things that are really important. And I foresee us building a really lovely network of varied practitioners and varied experts who have this scientific foundation. I hope that makes sense. Because yes, just because you've learned how to lift weights does not mean you should be teaching another person how to do that. Okay. Um, Final part of this, two parts. What about blending other modalities like movement, music, art into this? So yes, again, this is where I use that example of someone who might be an artist and wants to make beautiful cards with nervous system information and prompts and cues, right? This doesn't have to be just one-on-one. There might be someone here who's a documentary filmmaker. We sure could use a documentary on this work. So maybe that's the project, and you know how to find funding at the government level, and you take this work and you bring it out into multimedia. Like the creativity piece is huge. Like there's endless ways to bring this out there. And then the final question from this one person, will you train the cohort in somatic movement, fitness, lifestyle, well-being, up and down work? So we will definitely do up and down work in this with you. It might be just with me. It might be Elia might come along. We're not sure yet. But as I mentioned, basic core movements, squatting, crawling, rolling, extending, flexing, rotating, how you sit on a chair, how you get up from a chair. These are the basic tenets of Feldenkrais. The first lesson, which is impossible to teach online, and I can't wait to do it in person because I used to always teach it, is called What is Good Posture? And it teaches a person how to go from sitting to standing and standing to sitting. And it's a beautiful lesson that I think all humans should learn. And we did that actually in Broughton. Some of you got some of that. So, these are the things that we'll do that are very functional and aren't therapeutic, right? That's what I'm trying to say. We're not going to teach you how to manipulate muscle tissue and mobilize joints. No, that's for a physical therapist to do. Okay. Or Feldenkrais practitioner, for example. Um, how does one who does this work get insurance? Great question. Well, if you have insurance because you're also a massage therapist or a therapist, one could say you use it under that. In my experience, it is very difficult to find insurance for practices that aren't as recognized. However, some places have found ways to ensure people who do Reiki and color balancing things and things that you would say are a bit more woo-woo. But I have found that, if things got really out of hand, it's possible that those insurance companies still wouldn't cover you. So again, this is where we're in a bit of a Wild West scenario here. I'll be really honest. And this is where you have to be very diligent with your ethics, with your ego, and it's almost like you're adopting that Hippocratic oath that medical doctors take, which is do no harm. Do no harm. And for me, it's do good work, because sometimes something still might flare in a client or a student, just as you have probably. I know when I've done this work, things will flare up, things will get swollen, that you won't sleep for a bit of time. This is the system restructuring, re-regulating. These are normal side effects, we could say, of getting more regulated. This is again why your own health and getting to yourself to a point where you've understood all the potential things that might occur when someone's just learning how to roll like a baby could start to come up, right? Lots of developmental early patterns come out often when we're learning how to roll again, how to use our spine, how to crawl. Many of us never crawled as babies because we were in contraptions, right? So these are the things that we will talk about and we'll learn about. But you are kind of venturing off on your own in a way. I will say that for insurance. Almost through these. Business model. How do you get clear about your business model and regarding one-on-one clients? There's marketing. How do you succeed? This is a great question. So we could spend 5 years talking about marketing and business. I will do something within this to guide you in directions, but this is a valid question because yes, you need to be your own business owner. So you need to be comfortable asking for money. You have to be comfortable charging. You have to be good enough to charge. I'll say that too, right? So there will be people that will have a long list of credentials, and I know them, they can't make a business run. And it's not because they're not trying. It's, remember what I said a while ago about this has to really be what you're supposed to do. Oddly, the world will figure it out. If you're supposed to be doing this and you put in the work and you put in the elbow grease, you will find work. But if you're doing it because you're trying to look cool and you're trying to be God and save people, that won't work. Being really honest here, right? So the one thing I sometimes say to my students, and I'll say it now, is for those of you on social media, because I know some of you are, and that's how you promote. And I will say, if you don't live in a small town where you're getting your clients from the local grocery store bulletin board or being referred by local people, you will need to get comfortable being online and promoting yourself online. Typically, that's what has to happen. But for those who are in line, and you'll know this, you'll put out a good piece of nervous system education content and people will like it and they'll give you positive feedback and you might feel a little good about it. You don't want to get into that trap because what happens when the comment comes that isn't positive? Because trust me, it will. If that stops you and pushes you back, not good. So this is where you have to have full neutrality with this work. Just like a physician or a surgical doctor, they're going to try their damnedest to save someone when they've had a car accident. And yes, if that person doesn't survive, they feel terrible and it's not good. And if someone survives, they're good, good, I did it. And then let's go into the next person and then the next person, right? So that's the other thing. You cannot be doing this for your own self-glorification that I am now a trauma therapist. You do this because it's just the job you want. That's about it. I know that might sound really harsh, but I'm being very honest, right? This is what's led me, I think, to success is I try not to get that energy, try to really push it away as much as I can, both the praise and the bad stuff. Okay, think about school teachers. You know, how do they do that, right? They still love it and yet they know they're going to get screamed at by kids and all this stuff, but they know that's what I want to do. I want to be a school teacher. I want to teach kids. It's kind of like that in a strange way. um okay, already addressed that. Books. Someone asked, what books will be mandatory to read? I have several books for my reading list, and I'm currently in the process of reading them one by one. Great. If you're currently reading, that's great. I will say this, if you have been interested in this work for years or even the last year and you have yet to pick up a book and start reading out of your own interest, that's a good indication that maybe this isn't the path. No one told me to read Norman Doidge's books or Gabor Mate's books. or even Peter Levine's books, because they don't tell you to read those books in the SE trainings or anything. I read them because I wanted to read them, right? I've started rereading one of Feldenkrais's books just this week because I'm looking for snippets to use in the training as case study, right? So again, not saying, that you shouldn't do this if you haven't, but how you act in your daily life and bring this information in will tell you whether or not this is really your thing. Like I said, no shame if you haven't read a book. It's just possible that this has not been top of mind, right? Maybe you start reading them now, and that's cool. But this idea of consuming the information and bringing it in, it is very important that it is happening in your own impulse, as opposed to me telling you this is what you have to read. It's like saying, is this going to be on the test? Right? I'm only going to study what's on the test. We want to get out of that mentality in this. We want to get into the mentality of you being your own scholar and naturally gravitating to the work without me telling you what to do. These are just some of the little hints that have given me success. So I want to share them so that there's success for those who come into this. And for those who are like, I don't like this, it doesn't seem right, then that's fine. I've already kind of answered this. This is a question that came in directly to me. Can you speak more? I'm going to move my chat over here. Can you speak more to the life situational aspects that can help oneself be set up for success for this program? So I've already mentioned relationships, personal health. Yes, this is another person. Regulation. Yes, we will offer guidance. I will in the level 1 around self-care, self-mastery. The next question, can you be working a full-time job or in full-time school? Do you recommend that people are doing part-time work? And or what if a person is living on disability? So if you're living on disability, I'm going to say pretty strongly this is probably not the right time. Because, and again, please read the full of the Scientuitive Practitioner Track website. SBSM was about pacing, about taking your own time, and that's important, so important. But in this situation, if someone is not able to wake up for our 10 a.m. starts, I never start at 9 a.m. with training, it's always 10 a.m., and they're struggling and they need to go to their room and have naps during the day, not for you. Okay, you need to be in enough full energy and enough window of tolerance to push a little bit when we're in, say, live training. In terms of full-time school, if someone is in full-time school right now, I would say that this is probably not a good thing because you are going to need more than a couple hours a week. I've outlined on the site, well, you'll need, and it depends on where you're at and how much study you've already done, but about 5 to 7 hours a week. And that's minimum, right? It depends how geeky you want to get. So if you have a full-time job, again, it depends on your job. What's full-time, right? Is full-time 12-hour days or is it more like 9 to 5? I do say on the site, you don't want to be studying like when you're dead tired, falling asleep at the kitchen table after you've cooked dinner, put the kids in bed, and like, okay, now I'm going to study. You wouldn't want a medical doctor to study that way to become a surgeon, right? So I know we're not quite there with this, but you need to have a little bit of space in your day, not just in the evenings and not just on the weekends. Okay. I'm just going to go through the chat here. Okay. Oh yeah, for food, we are going to make sure all dietary things are taken care of, whether it's celiac, whether it's dairy, whether it's, we're going to I'm going to be very specific with the cooks. We need this kind of food. Um, what level of psychological knowledge should one have to apply? Would SBSM training be full enough? 100%. SBSM is enough. Understanding of SBSM and application in your own system. But I mean, when you think about it, for all of you who have been through SBSM many times, do I ever say limbic system? Do I ever say amygdala? Do I ever say, neurotransmitters, norepinephrine and beta adrenergic nerves coming out from the spinal columns at this T1 to T5? I can say those things, but you don't need to know them. And I don't use them if I practice with someone. If you want to get, geeky and get a medical textbook and start learning about all the ways in which the nerves come out, go for it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. When we get into higher levels, there will be basic anatomy because it is important to understand some basics. This is the femur, this is the humerus, these are your clavicles, right? These are the spinal muscles, like these are where the hip flexors are, like real basic, but not, we're not going to do cadaver study or anything like that. So that was that question. Let's see here. Uh, Someone asked, could we do both European and Vancouver? I see. So I get that. So someone, for instance, might have a conflict, or maybe you want to come to Vancouver and be in the mountains. I get that. So it really depends on our numbers and if we can have crossover. I would prefer that the cohorts stay together because you will know your cohort in person. But if there's like a conflict, then we would figure out how to make it happen. I would prefer you guys not hop over the ocean because you want to check out Austria one segment and you want to check out Whistler Mountain one thing. If you are living in Europe, then I would say that's the one you want to be in. If you're living in North America, that's the one you want to be in. Someone had asked at one point, what are the topics that are going to be covered? And what will happen, and this is outlined again on the web page in terms of some of the bullet points for online study. We're going to just kind of be mixing and melding and mixing and melding. I'm assuming when you come in, you have confidence talking about what the nervous system is. Sympathetic, parasympathetic, dorsal, vagal, diaphragms, shock trauma is this, developmental trauma is that, right? So those things have been laid and you have already had an amazing foundation of theory through SBSM and taking in the Q&A calls and taking in the training calls. I don't know how to express that as much as it's like you have a lot. We will just keep layering in those pieces. And if there's a question, that comes up around something specific, I will dive deeper into this. This is why it's important to be live and to attend and take notes, right? The big part of level one, and I'll just kind of review this, is going to be your own personal system, learning how to interact with your peers and teaching your peers how to go through basic neurosensory exercises. I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but it might be something like I have a bunch of, these little cards and everybody gets a card like during the first session. And one person it says kidney adrenal, one person it says diaphragms, one person it says orienting. And then your job is to teach that to your peers for 20 minutes, right? For example. So you have to come in with enough baseline basics, being able to connect, orient, feel, breathe, and then go into that. Right. So we're gonna hit the ground running. It'll be supportive, right? It'll be a little scary, and that's fine. And the reason why we're practicing so soon is because the moment you're in the real world, if you haven't practiced in many different situations and scenarios, it's terrifying, right? And so you want to do this with your peers. We will also do public practicums and online. So what that means is we will use our membership, our followership, and we'll say, hey, there's a no fee drop-in class, and one of our SciIntuitive mentees is teaching. It's a student teaching class. So they will have to agree to this. They know it's a student in teaching. I or Seth will be there and you'll teach. And you might have 10 people show up or you might have 50 people show up, right? And you will guide them through a drop-in class. We'll theme it so that you have an idea of what to do, but that will also be part of level 1 so that you get comfortable teaching to a sea of people who aren't saying anything. Because how do you teach that? You teach that through your own psychic ability to sense the field and what you're seeing, right? You can't have your list. It has to be through what you're seeing. And what if you can't see? Some people ask, how did you create these lessons, Irene, without anybody in front of you? And that is from practice, because I have taught over and over again to people. So this is why it's important in in-person workshops that you're teaching to your peers, so that if you want to create your own audios, you can do it. Because I know a lot of you you speak English, but you speak another language, and you want to offer this in your mother tongue, right? So you have to practice not only, with us, but in your mother tongue. So hopefully we'll find ways to match people up with different languages. Had one more question that I wanted to mention, and then one more answer, but it's just left my brain. Yeah, everything will be recorded. So we record everything and it's there for reference and to go back, but it's not, as many of you know in beta, it's not so that you can miss the class. It's so that you can refer to it and take notes, that kind of thing. Here's one. So from Diane, I'm currently a stay-at-home mom, home educating my kiddos. My 5-year-old, so I have time and capacity. I have no previous experience working with people in any kind of healing modality. Would this be a setback or even a block to doing this work? Not necessarily. So you do not, that's a good question. You do not have to be already trained in something else. So I'm wanting this to be a starting point for someone who does not have other training to be able to start. And again, this is why level 1, we're not creating practitioners in 1 year. We're doing the first step. There are many of you I know who are already practitioners. And so that's great too, right? And you will maybe have an advantage. I also have found in my trainings that those who have training in professional psychology and psychiatric and counseling world sometimes struggle a little bit because they've been taught a very specific rubric of how to work. And so they have to, speaking of unschooling and unlearning, they have to unlearn the very clinical way of showing up. And this is the stuff that I think is super fun, because I will know the moment I love this in the practicums from the beta people that went through beta. It's like you can tell when someone's trying to be a clinician, and it's like, stop that. Just be yourself, get into your body, and connect with this human the way you would a newborn baby, right? We're going back to that base level. We're not trying to be clinicians. We're not trying to be nurses. We're not trying to be physical therapists. We're trying to be SciIntuitive practitioners. So again, remember, science, intuition. So this is in us, I think. We know how to do this in our DNA core. So for some of us, it's going to take a little more work to get to that level, and that's fine. And for others, you're already maybe there a little bit because you've been doing this work for so long. And I know from listening to some of the SBSM alum who've been around for a while, who've gone into, say, the SE trainings, for example, they will say, I got into that training and I already knew what to do. They already knew how to work with people because they were working with themselves for so many years through the SBSM materials. So that's all for me. I know there's maybe some logistical questions that you might have. Like I said, if you haven't read that page slowly from top to bottom, do that. Look at all the little notes and all the thises and that's. And then if you still have a question and you're still wondering about something, just email us, support@irenelyon.com, and we'll get back to you, or the question will get to me. That's everything. We're charting new territory. So just like anything that involves pioneering and charting, it's exciting and it's also a little unknown. So the question is, you just have to really dig into your own core. And my sense is, because I'm going back to how I decided to do my trainings, it's a very quick yes or no. More information won't necessarily make the decision clear. If there's any hesitation in that yes, then it might not be the right time. But if it's like, oh my God, yes, this is exactly what I want to do, as scary as it is, and I don't know where the heck the money's going to come from, then listen to that. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Bonnie, for popping in links as you have. And we will be in touch. For those of you that apply, we'll see your applications. We're also in another round of SBSM. So remember, go back to the learnings as you can. There was a great Q&A call last week with Jen and Seth, early developmental trauma. So start reviewing if you know you want to apply. All right, it's good to see everybody, familiar faces and new faces. And we will talk to you all later. Bye for now.